Hello, Maureen. It's really good to be together again for our Higher Education Insights podcast. And today, again, we've chosen a really important topic, I think, for higher education. And we're going to talk about strategic partnering and think about some of the key considerations. So, as we begin to move out from this COVID pandemic, many of the challenges being faced, I think it's really clear that we're only going to move forward if we work with others. So maybe this is a really nice time to take a fresh look at partnerships.
Well, hi, Wendy. I'm really glad we're back together chatting about this particular topic because strategic partnerships is exactly what universities should be looking at today.
So if I can just remind everyone, the premise of our conversation is for us to think, if we were in our previous roles now, with me as university president and you as vice president for student affairs, what would we be talking about in our cabinet level discussions as we consider the topic at hand? And this time it's strategic partnerships. So I'm, as you know, very interested in how we connect universities, indeed all of higher education institutions, to the communities that we serve locally and globally. So rather than the ivory tower model, where universities separated themselves for the purposes of scholarly endeavour, we now have an enormous opportunity to tackle the societal problems by connecting deeply with our cities and wider regions or states and through national and international networks. If we're in dialogue with business, the professions, civic institutions, and the not-for-profit sector, and also with health and medical facilities and community groups, we can both advance the academic work of our teaching, learning, our research and innovation, and support knowledge-based solutions for the grand challenges of our day. I think this recent pandemic taught us we're all in this together. Resources are strained. None of us and no one organization has all the answers. So coming together in a myriad of different ways, from tactical or operational collaborations to strategic partnerships, is the way to recognize the complexity of our shared challenges and combine our strengths, working together for the common good.
I would agree, Wendy. And there are really two areas of importance when thinking about partnerships and their key considerations. One is the range of costs, benefits, and risks. And the other is the range of possibilities and opportunities for types of partnerships. And I think a good starting point for our discussion is, how will a partnership benefit the students, faculty, and staff of the university? Are there advantages to be gained by creating partnerships that cannot be achieved if the organization remains separate, or cannot be achieved as efficiently and effectively compared to working together? The second point is, will a partnership benefit the public good? And if so, will the benefit outweigh the cost to the university for participation?
As always, Maureen, good questions. And I think you're right to draw attention to the costs of working in partnership. And I'm not simply talking about finances here. It takes time to build trust, to align incentives and navigate often quite different governance and reward structures. There's also the risk we take in bringing the university brand and reputation alongside other organizations or in multi-actor stakeholder partnerships. So the benefits that you mentioned, we really need to make sure that they do outweigh the investment of resources. And that's always an issue to be considered carefully, as the time lag between investing and the return on that investment. We might call this the silent phase of a partnership, when we're burning up resources, but there are no results yet to show. That can be quite a long time, that lag phase. And I think it's where you find that that kind of humility that it takes to fuel a partnership is really important. We need to know what we each bring to the table, respect what everyone brings, and it means then we can honor the contributions of others and acknowledge those different ways of working. In fact, it means we open ourselves up to learning and co-creation as a very powerful way to create value, indeed shared value. At the last university I led, we captured this using a really simple word. And we talked about with, WITH, a very small word, but a very big endeavor that says working with others was a key part of our mission and strategy, creating these powerful coalitions and partnerships that advanced our academic reputation and impact, and also delivered that sense of value. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit later.
I agree, Wendy. That was a very powerful concept, the idea of the university working with others. And I do think, though, that there are also considerations in terms of the roles the different people at the university play in partnerships. For example, what is the role of a department head, an academic or an administrative department head, or the deans or vice presidents in the outreach to partners, or in the development and maintenance of partnerships? Who is actually going to form and shape the partnership? And how will the mutual benefits that you discussed above be ensured and developed? And ultimately, what is the impact on those department heads and deans as they take on responsibility for partnerships? Do the department heads and deans suddenly shift other duties to other people? Does partnership maintenance become a top priority at the expense of other duties to be performed for the university? Does it require additional staff to deliver on the partnership? And a key question for you, Wendy, is to describe what is the role of a president in partnerships?
Indeed, many an hour I've spent reading cases for partnerships, meeting the people involved, and of course attending official signing ceremonies, sometimes overseas, all in the name of academic excellence through collaboration. For me, I make the distinction between tactical or operational partnerships and ones I call strategic. So for operational ones, it might be that we're in a contractor-supplier relationship for the delivery of goods or services. I'd say we can leave that kind of partnering relationship to one side in terms of this discussion. So let's focus then on the strategic partnerships. And to me as president, I wanted to be clear that there is a full alignment of values between the university and any prospective partner, and that there's a clear understanding of the deliverables and the impact both sides are seeking. As I mentioned earlier, there needs to be a clarity about the resources to be invested by all parties and the return that we're expecting on that investment. We also need an understanding that the partnership may be time limited. I've seen too many examples of partnerships that have actually outgrown one another. And there's one more point for me. We have to enjoy working together and commit to growing together, really being in close dialogue with one another so that we meet the inevitable bumps in the road, because there will be bumps in the road, but we meet them with good grace and we focus on getting things right. So having that sense of joy in partnerships is also important.
That makes a lot of sense, Wendy. I also think some of the important considerations are about the benefits as they directly impact students. As you know, my top priority always is students. And these benefits, of course, could be aligned with the institution's strategic plan. And the partnerships should be a method of helping to achieve those strategic goals. And this leads us to the type of partnerships that universities can explore and develop. Many partnerships allow students to have expanded opportunities that simply would not exist if the university were operating in isolation. Strategic partnerships that can benefit students include those that are established to create career connections for students, or long-term internship agreements, or long-term recruitment agreements for industries coming to campus to hire recent graduates as entering employees. Other similar partnerships can be developed if a university decided to tap their alumni and their donors who've expressed an interest and a commitment to the institution, and they're willing to move into career partnerships for students that would be designated specifically for students from a particular university. And there's also the partnerships with other universities locally that could allow for cross-registration classes, and also important partnerships between universities internationally that allows for students and scholars to have legitimate exchanges and programs to exchange. I think about too the other kinds of partnerships that could be developed with nonprofits, because they could provide service learning opportunities for students that are integrated directly with their classroom curriculum, and as a result provide exposure to populations and circumstances that students may not have firsthand knowledge of prior to completing a service learning placement. This can also include local and regional government entities that would provide service learning slots for students. And this is similar to the kind of partnerships that have been and can be developed with P through 12 institutions, allowing for education majors to have placements and student teaching assignments, and also articulation partnerships with community colleges. And those P through 12 institution partnerships can be a great benefit to faculty who are interested in P through 12 educational research projects.
I think that's a really interesting kind of sense of all the different types. And I can think of some great examples of strategic partnerships, that I've been involved with. So one in particular was the university I led, where we set up a brand new medical school and a new dental school by combining our health sciences expertise and reach into the community with another university that added some basic science and strengthened some of the research opportunities in the field. And these new schools added much needed resources to the region and allowed us to train doctors and dentists from a wider demographic and have them learn in local hospitals and clinics, so they were more likely to stay local upon graduation. I can also think about how we partnered with the city where the university was based to take forward initiatives on climate change and social enterprise, and how we created what we called an innovation ecosystem by adding our research knowledge assets to those of the city and the wider region to drive more inclusive economic growth. We also created partnerships with junior schools and high schools to create that kind of talent pipeline of students ready for university entry. And of course, there were important international partnerships, enabling our students and those of our partners to exchange and study in another country or take up research that spanned borders. And our researchers, of course, were by definition global, networked into partnerships around the world, as well as working locally with community organizations. As I said, connecting the university's talent and knowledge assets in this way, in these different ways, allows them to play their full role in creating more inclusive and sustainable communities locally and indeed internationally.
Well, yes, much of what you're talking about, Wendy, relates to the creation of new knowledge and contributions to the public good. And I agree with you that universities have an obligation to contribute to their local and regional area and add to the public good for the citizens in their immediate and extended areas. And I recall the work that you did on that medical school and dental school and the tremendous impact the dental school clinics had on the overall health of the region. It was a tremendously positive impact on lifespan that wouldn't have occurred if you hadn't developed those partnerships. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the structures that need to be put in place in order to ensure the partnerships go smoothly. For example, what kind of contract arrangements would be desirable? What kind of duration do both parties in the partnership want? What kind of arrangements would be made, for example, regarding the research you discussed in terms of who owns that intellectual property that results from the partnerships? How much trust really is required in order to enter that relationship and take on a partner? And what levels of communication should exist throughout the length of the partnership?
I think, as always, the devil is in the detail, as they say, and by definition, every partnership is unique. But I think there are some basic pointers that are helpful here. I mentioned one, and that's alignment around values. Then there's a sense of reciprocity and value creation for all parties involved. I mean, when it comes to a business working with a university in partnership, or indeed any organization working with the university for that matter, the partner needs to understand that we need to publish our findings and make a knowledge contribution to the public through those scholarly articles, presentations, news reports. Of course, we can agree how this is handled in terms of making sure we don't jeopardize any patent filings or other ways to protect intellectual property. For partnerships with other universities, that's relatively straightforward as long as we recognize that quality assurance and governance in each university may be different. Sometimes where there are multiple universities involved, the parties agree to set up a special vehicle to hold the intellectual property or manage the governance processes. In fact, I'm on the board of one of these for a consortium of 9 universities in Europe. And then for partnerships with the city council or the mayor's offices or economic development agencies, there are some important areas to ensure that we remain politically neutral and that the alignment with the academic mission is really clear. But all of these are relatively easy to handle. And I think it's the same with community groups and not-for-profits. Understanding each other really comes first.
I would agree, Wendy. And your point goes back to the earlier comments you made about how important it is that partnerships are, in fact, mutually beneficial. And I see this as an issue of risk management. When you are entering or maintaining a partnership, but even with good structures for partnerships, there can be more risk experienced by a university. If, for example, the university agrees to create the physical space for that partnership and they make the space available, or in some cases, even build out a space for the partnership to take place. If that partnership sours, then the university may be left with a bespoke space that's not easily converted back to typical university usage. And this leads me to thinking about an important consideration about partnership structure and arrangements, which is having an exit strategy in mind or even in writing. Although university partnerships work well generally, there certainly are instances where they fail to go the distance originally intended. And I think it's prudent for universities to create reasonable exit strategy steps long before any problems are ever on the horizon.
Absolutely. I mean, I think with any partnership, it's important to check whether the original goals are being met or new goals need to be agreed, and whether the relationship is still valuable to both parties. Sometimes it's right to be proactive about ending a partnership and exiting respectfully. At other times, we'll already have put a planned end date into a contract, or there's a time to review the partnership. I remember having to navigate a rather tricky exit from an overseas partnership, and some of the key learning here was that it had been set up on the basis of personal connections and had never really been fully owned by either institution at a strategic level. So once the lead faculty changed, there wasn't really any proper ownership at a governance level to sustain the relationship and ensure the quality that we needed in a partner. Tricky, but important and necessary work.
That's a really good point about the structures that are needed. And I would agree, Wendy, that partnerships are particularly important and that they do most of the time work very well, though there can be disappointments occasionally. But as we've indicated, there are so many benefits to students, faculty, staff, and the institution's reputation, and to the public good as a result of universities strategically searching out and developing strong, useful, and forward-thinking partners and creating mutually beneficial partnerships, that it's certainly something to be recommended to everyone, especially in today's world.
Indeed. There's a wonderful African proverb I'm thinking of that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think this captures the approach that we've been discussing here around partnerships. So universities and higher education have such an important role to play in advancing a more equitable society and supporting a just transition to a world where no one is left behind, that we simply must connect with others to make our fullest contribution, whether that's partnering with our students throughout their lives, whether it's with strategic partnerships with other universities or with business, civic institutions, and community groups. Let's go further together.
I agree, Wendy. And I'm very glad we had a chance to discuss this really important topic on the value of university partnerships. It couldn't be more timely.
Thanks so much, Maureen. And until next time, wishing everybody a wonderful summer. We're going to take a break over the summer and we'll come back to talk about some more important topics from the world of higher education and share some of our insights. So have a great summer.
Bye now.